Yeah, I almost feel like I'll be missing this music starting from tomorrow. Welcome everyone, it's the last day of Berlin FIDE Grand Prix 2022. Well, to jump a little bit ahead, there will be one more tournament in Berlin, which is the third leg. So maybe we will say Berlin once again, but for this tournament, this will be the last day. This is the tiebreak of the finals. So one more time, welcome everybody. The games are about to start. As you can see, Nakamura sitting, Levon arriving in his chair. And here we are, Miro, as you all know by that point, and I believe I'm joined by Jesse February once again. Jesse, can you hear me?
Hi, yes, I'm here. I had to refresh. How are you doing?
Everything's fine. I'm really excited to see what's gonna happen. Green shot from Levon, almost formal.
Yeah, he's wearing a green screen today.
A green screen. So you mean he'll get the video and then he will kind of, you know, override this with the most funny shot that he'll find appropriate. Or depending on the result, perhaps, right? Depending on the result, perhaps. Okay,
yeah,
so...
No, I'm really excited.
They're
starting the clock.
Yeah, E4, and a quick reminder, so this will be at the very least 2 rapid games, 15 plus 10, right? If tied, then 2 blitz games, 3 plus 2, and then if this still tied, then the Armageddon game, where everything's going to be decided. Yeah, so far.
I was really enjoying the commentary yesterday. It was an unexpected addition to the team. We had Dubov commentating along with Miro, and I was sitting behind the scenes and I was just absorbing all the information you guys were sharing together, and I really enjoyed it. Of course, I was in chat sort of modding as well as chatting to everyone. And I had a lot of fun. And I mean, I was ready to jump in, and then they agreed on a draw, and I was like, well, this is half a day off then.
yeah, that was a bit unexpected, to be honest, right? When they've just agreed a draw, but perhaps it wasn't much for Levon at the final position. What's interesting, I think it was on Twitter or Facebook yesterday that someone mentioned that Levon kind of has to feel a little bit upset, kind of missing 2 chances. So one might argue that in game 1 Naka also had some chances, right? There was a point in the game where White was much better / winning. So, but overall we could say that both classical games were sort of in Levon's favor, but finished in a draw.
Okay.
And that.
Yeah, what was your take on yesterday's final position? Because I know that Levon sacrificed a few pawns and then had a perpetual at the end. Was the perpetual necessary? If he had gone for something else, would it have meant anything?
Yeah, I don't know if there was a way to play for an advantage in a final position, right? So clearly before that there was a path that could have given him chances, but once again, as we discussed with Daniel yesterday, so Naka is a very good practical player, so he identified the moment when, let's say, okay, things went wrong, I'm no longer playing for like full equality, and I have to kind of switch to defense a little bit, and he's done it perfectly. Okay. Once again, perhaps you know, a display of very good and of very good preparation from Levon, and actually from both players, because they've reached this position, and this position is move 15, by the way, right? So they've reached this position very quickly, both gaining time in the process. So it was yet another Rui Lopez, another invitation to play the Marshall counterattack from Levon, right? So, well, particularly this castle move instead of d6 move. So castles, and then h3, one of the anti-marshals, bishop b7, d2, d3, and then an immediate d5. I think last time they've played it was d6, right? I think it was d6 and then queen d7 later on and so on. So this time d5, which is a pawn sacrifice, and knight takes e5 is known, a4 perhaps is known as well. What's interesting is after knight d4, white just calmly plays knight d2, ready to trade the bishop on b3. Yeah, but then it creates an awkward position for black, because e5 pawn is hanging, and if you go f6, then knight a5 is quite annoying, right? You can't keep the bishop on a long diagonal, and then perhaps the best you can do is just to guard the bishop, so white captures on b7, kind of equals the number of bishops. Let me put it this way, I still believe the bishop is more powerful piece than the knight, yeah? And yeah, that would be in white's favor. But Levon was not caught by surprise. He goes knight b4, that's once again pretty standard, I believe. So they are ready to sacrifice the pawn on e5. Knight takes e5, queen to d5, threatening the most, the most powerful threat in the game of chess, which is checkmate in one. Yeah, and white played f3.
When you see a mate in one, wait and look for a better move.
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah, it was this, I think it comes from kind of a Soviet school rules that you were supposed to sit on your hands. That's what they would say. Okay, kind of sit on your hands so that you are not making a move too quickly. If you found a move, look for a better move. Yeah. And there was another, now that I'm thinking, a kind of Soviet school of chess, it was very materialistic. Like one could think we would be inspired by Tal, sacrifices, beautiful games. No,
right.
It was very materialistic to such an extent.
You favored your pieces rather than your activity.
Yeah, like weak pawns and stuff like that, and sometimes they would take it to an extreme. Like if you can win a rook immediately, or you see a beautiful checkmated tree, you know what you're supposed to do? You're supposed to win a rook. Because you start as the Soviet chess player, you start learning from the endgame backwards, right? So you already know by that point that how to win with an extra rook. And this beautiful checkmate in tree, it might be that you're mistaken, right? Take the rook in one move and not go for some long variations. Okay, we'll see how this will
unfold. The Soviet chess school promoting painful deaths for your opponent.
Yeah, absolutely. Alrighty, so bishop to d6, d4. Well, it's a very, very strange position where I want to say that black always have to have compensation. That's my feeling. I'm not quite sure why Naka even goes for it. So rook a to e8. Perhaps I have to add why he's going for it that quickly, because you may end up in any position, right? Sometimes you're just forced to go for it. But it seemed that he's voluntarily entered this.
At the Russian chess school.
Kind of, arguing. Okay, it's an extra pawn, and then your activity will eventually vanish, and the pawn will stay. Yeah, sometimes. I remember people were claiming that Korchnoi was playing this way. So he would look for imbalance, and sometimes he would sacrifice material, sometimes he would grab material, even though doubting its objective value, but kind of considering himself a better player, and what better player needs in chess to create some sort of imbalance, right? And then you can prove that this is where you outplay your opponent. Because, imagine completely symmetrical position, you have one open file, and go figure, go prove that you're a better player. I'll be exchanging all the rooks, on this open file. Prove that you're a better player. It's tough, right? And then whenever you create some sort of imbalances, like a slight material disadvantage for initiative, or, for sometimes, like you give up the initiative, but you have better pawn structure. This kind of generalized exchanges, so to speak. So you're not exchanging piece for piece, but you improve your position in one factor, and then you kind of give away something else. And this is where normally stronger player prevails. That's
Indeed, and it reminds me of the exchange sacrifice line in the Sicilian where you sacrifice the rook on c3 and maybe you get a compensation of 2 pawns, or there's a severe weakness in white's center and so on. And what I know is the sacrifice in the Tarish and the French where you sacrifice the rook on f3, and that's to get sort of an exposed king, but the line is so sharp. And I'm probably going to remember this game wrong, but I know that it was Karyakin versus Fabiano Caruana, and there was an exchange sacrifice on d1 where I think he Caruana long castled, and then he sacrificed his rook for the bishop, and Karyakin took the rook, and somehow it was in Fabiano's favor. I don't know if you know which game I'm talking about, but it wasn't too long ago, maybe a few years.
Yeah, well, honestly, I thought it could have been. Yeah, I mean, those two played quite a few games. The exchange sacrifice, I do remember, was actually with colors reversed. I think Karyakin was the one who sacrificed the exchange, and then that, by the way, was
it?
That was you'd be surprised, but that was in Berlin. It was Berlin Candidates 2018. I mean, that once again we could potentially be talking about different games, but that's the one I remember. That was quite impressive.
Okay. Yeah.
All right.
Awesome.
Right. So they've blitzed out.
The chat is asking about. If I may, chat is asking about the knight on b4. So Levant's knight on b4.
Is a
what's
beautiful
happening
knight.
With that knight?
Is a beautiful knight.
It's a beautiful.
Yeah.
And if c3 at some stage.
Yeah. Well, the question could be really like, what happens if you play c3? Well, the thing is, I mean, if there is nothing else, and I mean, something else could be. Okay, he swapped on b5, he can still play c3, right? If there is nothing else, if black, say, cannot take on e5, I don't know why he cannot take on e5. Even knight c6, and then trade the knights, right? Knight takes, you take on e1 maybe, and then you take on c6. I don't see any problem with black's position. I mean, you're a pawn down, but realistically, I mean, it's very, very similar to this martial attack compensations, right? When black has 2 bishops and some weaknesses around around white king, some weaknesses, light square weaknesses, specifically on the in the queen side formation, right? So let's say we swap the queens, I put the bishop on d5. I mean, all those positions, white might be marginally better, but practically never wins. I mean, that's the thing, because one of the potential defensive ideas, I mean, first of all, here it does look to me that black might have, some attacking prospects. But even if, let's say, nothing else works, one potential defensive idea is to go for the opposite colored bishops, right? So you are seeking the way to exchange your dark square bishop for white's knight. And then, it's opposite colors, maybe with the rooks, but still you're super solid, because on the queen side you control all the light squares. And this actually happens, I guess. A b5. No, he went bishop d2, which is a little bit trickier, right? Knight c6, bishop f4. So he didn't play c3, so his knight on b3 is not hanging. In some lines.
And it's quite a nice little tactic. I mean, if white gets knight takes c6 and the bishop happened to take on f4, then there's actually knight e7.
Knight e7, yeah.
With a nice 4.
Yeah, so now, for instance, if black passes in some way, right, like c6, for instance. Oh, sorry, f6, yeah. And then you take on c6, bishop f4 fails to knight e7. Therefore, black has to recapture. You take on d6, and it is better for white. At least you have knight versus the bishop.
Because of the c5 square.
Yeah, I might consider taking with the pawn. I'm still not very pessimistic for black. Seriously, I think black might be still kind of okay, but yeah, objectively, white has to be better. So after bishop f4, any captures? No, knight d4, he's playing. Oh, wait a second. How about knight d4 here in this position? Okay, Levon just went king h8, but can
He
we,
likes the king h8 move.
can we
as in the
check
first
can
game.
we check knight takes d4? Oh no, I'm going crazy.
Knight takes
Let me
d4.
explain. Yeah, knight d4, knight takes d4 works, right? I mean, just capturing on e5, and then after
Wait.
queen takes d4.
Oh, no.
After
takes,
queen
yeah.
d4, I've spotted a beautiful tactic, which was bishop c5.
Yeah.
And what a brilliant move. I'm pinning the queen, and if you take with the knight, I'm taking the queen. The little problem with that is the queen takes, and now instead of being one piece down, I'm two pieces down. So sometimes,
oh, no.
you know,
Okay, yes.
these glitches sometimes happen. And luckily, it's only commentary and not me playing this game.
Yeah, if only it worked. Maybe the pawn was on b6 would have been fantastic.
Yeah, with pawn on b6, it would just work, yeah. Or just
Yeah.
what else? Like if somehow you wouldn't be able to take with you wouldn't be able to take with the queen, yeah, maybe. All right, so he went king h8, and now if the queen is not there, some knight f7 is an issue, right? So can we get rid of the white queen? Not sure. Oh, sorry, black queen. No. So what? Now knight c6, he does plan to take on f4.
Okay, makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you have to protect the bishop. Or
Bishop, like
would it
bishop.
be good for white to exchange queens?
Once again, easier said than done, right? I mean, okay, he went bishop h2, protecting the bishop. Actually, when you've mentioned protecting the bishop, I thought maybe bishop h2 is the move, but yeah, wasn't fast enough to suggest it. It was played already. Yeah,
Okay, so
live
bishop
board
h2.
is not perfectly correct, right? The pawn has to be on d4, the
think
bishop
the
has to
pawn-
be
yeah.
on d6, right? But our board is spot on. Bishop
Yeah, we were looking at analysis
h2.
at least.
Bishop h2. I guess one thing black could do is just say play b4 or something, so not rush with any kind of forcing stuff. Just pretend that, yeah, everything's normal, I'm pawn down, I don't care much, and play this position. f6 is another option, but this kind of forces the knight to d3, where it's not bad anyway, I guess.
Or taking on c6, do you think?
Yeah, you can take on c6 as well, yeah. Bishop c6, I'm guessing. Yeah, it just overall, I'm not very optimistic about these positions for white, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's just, you know, an extra pawn. We'll see. Something interesting that
So
then...
how eager are you to see the tiebreak, the Armageddon?
The tiebreak. Don't know, really. Like, once again, I wouldn't mind, like, remember our discussion that, like, when you have a longish classical match, maybe the tiebreak should be played before the match so that we know who
That's
wins.
very true to decide.
Yeah, so kind of to put more pressure on the player who lost the tiebreak, and at least we know kind of at the end. Right, but same can be applied, I was thinking, same can be applied to such tiebreaks, because a lot of people consider specifically Armageddon to be a lottery, right? It's only one game, and you can lose on time, yeah, and stuff like that. So why don't we start a tiebreak with Armageddon? We play the Armageddon, we know what happens if it's, yeah, I mean, it's a little bit strange, I know, but if we change the mindset a little bit, so that less people would, you know, claim that it's a lottery. You've lost the Armageddon, okay, but then you actually do play those matches, right? For instance, yeah, you've lost the Armageddon, but you won in Rapid, you won the tiebreak. You've lost the Armageddon, you tied the Rapid, you won in Blitz, you still won the tiebreak. I don't see anything wrong with it. And it would mean, yeah, once again, it's kind of more pressure on the player who've lost the Armageddon, but there won't be such a frustration because sometimes, you know, it's a draw, and then you lose. Specifically, if you lose on time, some completely winning position, that's not what you want from a game of chess, which has an image of being very logical. Knight takes e5.
I don't think I've actually actively watched a live Armageddon. I mean, I've played in one, but also I haven't commentated on one before, especially with this addition to the increment after 60 moves. I've never experienced that ever. And, oh, did he give the pawn back?
Yeah, he simply gets the pawn back, right, because now queen d5, he trades on h2. And I think it's very likely to be a draw, right? So look,
looking at the broadcast, I almost forgot that that's a bishop on b7, and I got so afraid for a second. I was like, are we going to see a Bote's gambit here?
Yeah. Is it kind of the official term nowadays, the Bote's gambit? Because I still feel like it's all
just
made.
slipped out. I thought about that after I said it, and I was like, what if people don't know what that is? So when you blunder your queen,
I mean,
it's referred to as a Bote's gambit,
but it's kind of, you know, this youth wang kind of thing, because it's been, I don't know, chess was invented like with modern rules, you know, with modern rules, how much? It's like 400 years, something. And right from the offset, you know, people were blundering queens. And then all of a sudden, like last couple of years, there is one specific lady who blunders queens, apparently, right? And we name after her. While yeah, there have been examples of blundering a queen in a World Championship match. So why don't we?
Oh, okay, I didn't know that. Why don't we call it that, right?
Yeah. Well,
I don't know. I suppose they're always looking for trendy ways to rename things. So I wish I had a solid answer for that. That's a very good point.
Yeah, but seriously, for those who perhaps, yeah, I mean, I believe nowadays everyone's aware, but if you're not, guys, yeah, that is referring to just leaving your queen unprotected or putting it on a square.
So what is your take? I mean, he wants to trade queens into an endgame where Levant, he has a knight and two sets and both a rook. What is your take? Perhaps white is more confident attacking the pawns on the 7th rank, and also,
yeah.
I mean, there's no sort of threat of back rank checkmate as well.
Well, I think black should not allow, or rather should not trade on d4, try not to trade on d4 by himself, because he might end up in a worse position. Like trade on d4, knight d4, yeah, you probably do lose a pawn, right? Unless you want to play c7, c6 after that, and rook a7, bishop a8, but this is not how chess is played, right? You won't lose the pawn immediately, but you're far more likely to lose the game.
Right.
Yeah, queen e7 would be something I'd be interested in. It's interesting, I mean, the way Hikaru plays it, because at first it looked completely strange to me that he even has any hopes of playing for an advantage, right? But after queen d4, honestly, I'm struggling to find a comfortable move. Well, I'm certainly not interested in capturing on d4. I might be going queen g5 in this position. That's a little bit different. So queen g5, attacking f3, right? So the g pawn's pinned, and therefore bishop f3 is a threat. And I reckon if white insists on trading the queens by going queen c5, then I can trade already. Knight will be on c5 instead of d4, and then black plays black plays bishop d5, black plays c6, and everything's solid. I mean, that's the feeling. So do not trade on d4.
Chat is saying that Hikaru must really like that blue shirt. I think it's the 3rd day in a row that we see him in that sort of shirt. Maybe he owns maybe 5 or 6 just like it. And that it brings him luck, apparently.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes you do wonder, like players keep wearing the same kind of the same type of cloth, right? I mean, and you wonder if it's literally the same or or they just have a few, right? Queen to
Hey,
G5.
your prediction was correct.
Yeah, Queen G5. I remember there was, or rather used to be on many occasions, it used to be the case with Rajabov, because he had, I think it was a sweater, not a short, but could be a short, which would, you know, like there'd be a lot of stripes, like white and black stripes, and it would do weird things when televised, like when you have a camera on something of that type.
Oh, right.
You know, it'd be you know, like
I know
glitching.
what you're talking about. It's like when you take a photo of your computer screen, it's almost like the lines jump in a way.
Right, and we would do the live coverage, and obviously it's a little bit annoying. Like whenever you get the camera on Rajabov, and he would wear this practically every day, and we would make some nasty jokes about okay, maybe it's a time to change and so on. And later on he was asked by one of the journalists, I mean, what's up with the shirt? And he says, okay, I have 5 of those or something like that. So he said he definitely liked his outfit, so he bought a bunch of those. Yeah, he bought a bunch of those.
Yeah.
All right, yeah, so far really, like the line that I've mentioned briefly sort of plays out. So the bishop is on d5, Hikaru played rook a7, now starts jumping with this knight d3. Well, knight b4 is sort of a threat in this position. Once again, regrettably, the live board is not entirely accurate because rook a7 and bishop d5 was inserted, yeah, of course. The bishop on b7 looks really sad. The reality can be seen on our analysis board. Yeah, the bishop is on d5. So knight b4 is sort of a threat. If you play, say, king g8, just think that you want to play normal endgame, bring your king to a center. Then after knight b4, you might be in a bit of trouble. Because, yeah, I mean, it's a rook endgame.
Do you think maybe what is better is to play something like g6 or h6 just to relieve the king and give the rook some freedom? Because the moment the rook has to be active,
you mean like knight b4?
I mean, there's no back rank mate.
Knight b4, rook
Something
d8.
like that. Yeah.
That's actually a clever point. You probably do make a draw like this. You end up being down a pawn, right? Knight d5, rook d5. Rook takes f7.
And if the rook goes,
I don't know if with or without check. Oh, let's say rook d2 immediately, not so important.
Okay.
I think you go c3 with white. Rook takes b2, rook c7, and you do end up being down a pawn, right? Takes b4, c4, b3, this,
maybe this is a bit,
king h2, but it's a draw, right? It will end up being 3 versus 2. Black will.
He played g6.
He played g6. Yeah, bravo, Jesse.
Thank you. I'm gonna put it on my CV, one of my life's greatest accomplishments.
Guessed the move of Levon Aronian. You should wait for some. You know, I mean, that's a common joke. In fact, like you wait for an absolutely obvious recapture. Like imagine, I don't know, rook is traded on d8, and black's only move would be to recapture on d8, and then you claim, okay, now I'm guessing the move Magnus Carlsen, whoever Levon Aronian will make, right, in seconds. So like we wait, for instance, for knight b4 to happen, and then when white plays knight d5, now you can shine, like saying, okay, I'll guess the move correctly. But g6 I do give a credit. I mean, it does seem to be a very good move in terms of like just making a draw pretty much immediately. Right, because you free the rook, right? White's not forced to go knight b4, but why on earth white would be better if he goes king f2 and you are free to move the rook? Maybe still play rook d8. White's not better at all. At least to me it looks like. So I guess after g6. There won't be all that much happening, unless, of course, Hikaru is inclined to play this 3 versus 2 rook endgame that we were looking at which he might. I mean, it's not absolutely ridiculous. I mean, you can try.
Do you think there's any chance for black to find a way to seek an advantage? So he starts with rook c7, but the reason I ask is because of the bishop versus knight situation.
Yeah, but this bishop is kind of not very active, right? I mean, it's quite limited. The fact that white has the pawn on f3, and imagine I can also play b to b3, if anything, right? And the bishop is really limited, its active possibilities. After rook c7, though, I'm thinking, what am I supposed to do? Shall I play some rook to rook to b8, rook to a8 move? I really want to activate the rook. Rook e8 doesn't really help because king f2, so white has kind of a comfortable reply to it. Guards e2 square and rook a8, so using the other open file. Rook a8. Now knight b4.
But after knight b4?
Knight b4. I think he'll answer that with... wait a sec, how do you do it? Maybe rook a4? To try to force... rook a4 should be good enough. Probably leading to the... so my problem with the... first I thought check on a1, don't know where the king goes, let's say king h2, so it's safer. Rook b1, but then b3 happens, right?
I would have thought so too, perhaps with like rook c1 as well, because if at any point the knight would
if he takes on d5, then or c6, or c6, then you attack c2. Yes, so I think you're right, but yeah, this also seems to work. And then rook c1, then rook c1. Yeah. So maybe that's holding.
I mean, if the king goes to h2, I would even go as far as to play something like rook d1, but it doesn't really matter probably. Okay,
let's see. Knight b4. Aronian's still thinking. Alternatively, what you could do, you could play rook a4, sort of forcing him to decide, because knight c6 is not possible, right? Oops, sorry. He went king g7. Interesting. He went king g7, so he basically accepts the endgame pawn down. Does he? Because knight c6 is an option. What I thought was rook a4. Oops, rook a4 here. Point being, if white plays c3, which is sort of a natural move, then you give a check and you go rook b1, right? You go rook b1, and now there is no b3, so the b pawn is in danger. The b pawn is in danger. If white captures on c6, you have rook c4, and you probably win this. Or do you? No, you don't win. It's a check and knight e7. It's a silly line, Okay.
He didn't go with rook a1.
Yeah. So we actually do have rook endgame pawn up for white. It's a bit of a surprise. Okay, swapped everything on c6 and rook d8, so that the rook will go to d2. Might be a little bit tricky, If it would be just a passed pawn. It's not 2 versus 1, but just like one single passed pawn for white on the queen side.
Would you still consider that a draw?
I would say that it'd be easier for black to defend, because now you kind of have the additional weakness, the b pawn, right? And at some point, like, it could be that white sacrifices one of his guys on the king side, but captures b pawn and gets 2 connected passed pawns rolling. And that's a little bit scary. So let's imagine. Okay, g4 played. G4 is interesting.
With confidence.
I mean, he leaves, the part I don't like, he leaves the king on the first rank, right? So black can cut off the king after rook d2. But I'm wondering if the plan is to go g5 and then h4 if black goes h6. Who knows?
Okay.
We'll see. We'll see. So g4
Yeah, I think we'll
played.
definitely see rook d2. I like your rook d2 idea because at any point if black decides to go after the b5 pawn, that he's guaranteed to at least win back the
Yeah.
c2.
So g4, rook d2, right? Let's see what... I mean, maybe there is no need to rush with g5, yeah? Maybe you start by going b4, and then what you want is c3, put the rook on c5. Like, let's assume black doesn't do anything. You put the rook on c5 and black still kind of shuffles, or then it goes g5. c3,
Right.
c3, and rook d3 allows king f2, so rook c2 is logically the move. And then you go to f1. And that's the danger of having this 2 versus 1, because like if you just shuffle randomly, it destroyed all of my beautiful analysis. So my point was that at some moment in the game, white is rushing with the king along the first rank, gets to e1, d1, maybe black starts collecting the king side, and meanwhile white picks up the second pawn and rushes with 2 connected passes. It's not
I
that,
agree.
you know,
And on the board we have h4 and h5. We'll just need to update the live board.
h4 and black just played h5, yeah?
Okay, yeah.
h5 makes a lot of sense, right? So this way black kind of guarantees that his opponent will have a weakness, at least one weakness on the king side. Honestly, I wouldn't rush with h4. I don't know if it's, I mean, because b4 feels to be like sort of a first priority in this position. Maybe black would have still gone h5, you know, h4, try to fix the pawn on h3. Yeah, who knows?
I do have a question about the live position though. Do you think it would be a good idea for the rook to go to d4 now? Or is that
wait
the
a sec.
wrong
Wait a
focus?
sec. It's still white to move. Ah, you mean after say b4? After I play b4,
Okay, b4
rook
was played,
d4,
yeah. Perhaps.
c3, you capture, right?
Okay.
And then I go rook
Then you
c5.
lose.
Yeah, then I go rook c5, and this is where it gets sketchy, because
Perhaps rook f4.
yeah, but then once again, look, you have two pawns. I have 2 pawns, but white 2 pawns are connected passes, so they'll be,
Okay, true.
I mean, slowly but surely moving, like this setup. 2 pawns and the rook are known to be unstoppable, right? It'll take white quite some time, but black practically can't do anything with these pawns advancing. So the only question would be if 2 pawns remaining for black would provide enough counterplay, and that's always kind of tough to answer. We might be heading towards this position, by the way.
Okay, 3 minutes for Levan, 2.5 for Hikaru, and I think it's a 10-second increment.
Yeah. Look, it's a little bit surprising, but yeah, Hikaru once again deserves to be praised for, I mean, finding resources and taking chances when he's given chances. Because it looked absolutely dry, this position, right? And then some people would just like play a couple of moves, agree a draw, and he managed to pose some problems. And Aronian, when he played king g7, I believe he kind of underestimated a little the danger of this resulting rook endgame, because at first glance it seemed like just a dead draw. Maybe it still is, but maybe it still is a draw. But
according to the live board on our right, it looks as though black is completely
black
winning.
is winning because he's up a bishop. Yeah, we certainly need to do something about these boards.
Yeah.
Because by that point, I wonder if if we ever had the quote-unquote live board, which would keep being a live board for the entire game.
It's both a live board and not a live board. It's Schrodinger's board.
Schrodinger's board, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, so your question was about rook d4, and now that I'm thinking, what else is available? Is there anything else available?
Maybe the rook is really happy on the second rank and wouldn't want to leave, so perhaps playing
Like
something like
f6,
f6,
yeah,
getting the
f6, king
king, yeah, getting
g6,
the king
yeah.
to g6.
Okay, I still play rook
Just to support the
c5, yeah,
pawn.
king g6, c3,
c5.
for instance.
c3
And rook
and...
c2,
Oh,
right? Kind of,
you think? Okay.
yeah, so if white takes, you take on c3, you put the rook behind the b pawn, I guess that'd be enough, but then once again, some things might start, like king to f1, and this is where I'm trying to get the king to d1, yes, so king f1. It's not that black has all that many comfortable moves, right? f5,
Very true.
I can cut
Maybe
off the
even
king.
rook h2. Yeah.
Right, so...
If the king comes closer, perhaps.
Okay, Levon went for rook d4, rook h4. Let's see. Left himself with less than a minute. So now it's up to Hikaru to...
Yeah. I do have a question though. Have you ever experienced an opponent that sort of made annoying sounds or gestures or like other methods of distraction while you're playing the game, mostly when it's your move?
Many times.
Many times?
Many
What is the
times.
worst you've experienced?
I think it's not, it's more, you know, it's more not about the opponent, but the kind of the psychological state I'm in. I don't know if you ever felt this way, but I feel like if the position is good, if my mood's good, right, if I'm well rested, concentrated, I don't actually care. Okay, apart from some extreme cases, I don't actually care about what my opponent does. Okay, he drinks coffee, fine. You know, eats something, okay, a bit irritating, but fine. But yeah, but when you know, when your opponent, sorry, not your opponent, when your position is bad, and then all of a sudden, not only your opponent behaves badly, but the entirety of the playing hall is very noisy, and you know, and the arbiter is looking in an irritating way, and so on. And you always have to say, okay, stop. People are still people. I mean, they didn't change that much. It's just that you are irritated with the way the game's going. Right, but there've been examples, there've been examples. I played a lot of open tournaments, so believe me, there've been examples of people, I don't know, eating weird stuff during the game or kind of,
Yeah, I mean, I had an experience. I played a tournament. It was some coastal tournament in Martino de Porto, and one of the players there, I don't know if they had like, they weren't eating anything, but I think they just had this habit of like sort of pretending to eat, but like with their mouths open, and you just hear the sound constantly, like them clearing their throats, going nom nom nom, like the entire game.
Wow.
And you just can't concentrate. You end up putting your hands over your ears.
That's something not very pleasant is what you're describing, yeah.
No.
Look what he's done, King G2. King G2 was a very interesting move. I kept thinking of it, yeah. King G2, and then the rook on H4, it's kind of dominated a little bit. There is no threat for white, like King G3 would allow rook H1, but what do you play with black? So Levon decided on rook F4, and then...
I think maybe rook F5 is his move.
Yeah, if King G3, rook F5, yeah, but I believe white starts with rook C5 now. No, he did go King G3, and also made it on kind of a last seconds, but after King G3 you can play rook F5. What's the trick? Rook F5, rook C5, is that rook C5? No, F4. He's still kind of restricting this rook to the maximum.
Yeah,
it's
this
so
is a
interesting.
On the board now.
It's so interesting. So white keeps this idea of going rook c5 at some point.
Ooh, right. So you have to play something like f6 immediately, so your king can have access to f7 just to be in the square.
F6,
probably...
you know, f6 is not ideal because f6 rook d2. f6 rook d2, sorry, f6 rook d6, and the rook on f5 would be locked. Yeah, so he goes h4, trades the h-pawn for an f-pawn, very limited material, king g5.
Oh my goodness.
I guess rook f3 is what you do, right? You want to keep the pawn targeted, kind of.
I was always considering rook c4 for black an option, but with the passed pawn on the b file, I felt as though it was too dangerous. Even if black had a passed pawn, there was just no way to get around that. So probably.
Yeah, well, here it wouldn't work at all, right? Okay, so king to g4 and king to f4. So he'll be running. I believe he'll be running with the king towards the passed pawn now. Or we'll start with rook c5, perhaps. I don't know. Why would you actually prefer it this way? But that's fine, yeah. Rook c5.
Maybe f6 now.
Maybe king g6, no. Maybe f6. Yeah, king f6. Okay. And see, and white is running towards e4, d4, and he is planning to collect b5. And it seems black is not on time, right?
Nor is he on the clock. You'll have to make a move real soon.
Okay.
He decided to play king d6.
Yes, and now rook has to.
h3.
The rook has to go to like h3. White goes king d4. c3 is protected. b5 you can't really protect. So you'd be going with the checks on the h file like h4, h3, h2. White hides the king on b3.
He had 1 second on his clock.
Wow, what's interesting, Levon decided on rook d8 and then rook d1.
Instead of rook h3.
But what's that? Rook d8 then rook d1. I think he kind of panicked. I think he panicked.
Probably. I don't know. I think rook d8 was a mistake.
Yeah, quite likely. And now what? Now simply the pawns are moving. b5 you probably get, okay, rook f6. Rook f6 actually
makes... to see the players right
now.
Yeah,
makes a lot of sense. So now the rook stops the advance of the f-pawn.
Yes, the rook is cutting off the king, but those two pawns are connected.
Yeah, so b5 can be played, I guess. Rook d3 to make sure that the king is crossing the d file. Yeah, rook b1, and then it's a very well-known scenario. I believe white is winning with king c5. I don't know why you need the check. Okay, possibly. So he wants to activate the rook.
Possibly to cut off the king.
You know, the other version would be you go king c5, you push the pawns, and you are willing to sacrifice the rook for this last remaining pawn, the f-pawn. He can still switch back to this idea by going rook f8 check. And after king g5, just go king c5. I don't think.
And would you sacrifice the rook then?
Yeah, I mean the moment. I mean you just push your connected passes. The moment black plays f1, your pawns are like at b6, and okay, this is certainly wrong. I mean, I understand it's some sort of a trap, right? f3, he has a check on f8, but you don't really need this. I mean, I think going with the king to c5 would have been better.
Yeah, and I do not recommend to any of Hikaru's viewers to post a book, Dvoretsky's Endgame Manual, to his postal address. That'll be very rude. Don't do that.
King f5? Because it might turn to be a tempo loss, this rook b8. So now, I mean, the only explanation for rook b8 would be that now he starts moving the b pawn, but he would achieve the same with king being on c5, right? And now if you give a check on f8, you just lost one clear tempo. Black king goes to g4. Maybe you're still winning, but yeah, you basically have the same position tempo down. So it was really, really surprising move, this rook b8. Funny part would be if it's still a draw, if it was a draw. I mean, I declared for some reason that white was winning. I mean, obviously white would have winning chances, but white winning...
I would still think that there are chances, no? Maybe he just missed king c5 altogether.
Yeah, there are chances,
It's
of
still possible.
course. There are chances, of course.
Yeah.
But what I mean, he's got or will get precisely the same position tempo down. Like now, what he's planning to do, perhaps go b6, right? But
Oh my gosh.
anyway, he will. What's that? King
Ooh.
e3. King e3.
And now the black king can come across, maybe, and just ignore the pawn.
Rook b3. What about rook b3?
B3?
Isn't it a draw? Rook b3, kind of winning
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
Rook b3. Rook b3. Bravo. Yeah, I think Hikaru misplayed it. King d3. Okay, but now. So after f2, his plan is to give a check on f8 first, and then go king c4. Oof, confusing. I
Well, they are playing in
be...
seconds, so it's kind of stressful. They know what they're playing for.
Yeah.
100%.
I mean, it's very confusing. I mean, I'm sure they're making mistakes, but once again, my claims of this being winning, this being a draw, I cannot really state anything with any degree of confidence. So okay, so now
So he went the other way with the king.
Yeah, but eventually king c2.
Ooh.
What is that? What is that? It's a very interesting.
What is that?
I mean, he's probably winning now. Yeah, rook f8, and he is winning because look what he's got. Look what he's got. Black king will be cut off on the f file. Yeah, and now I mean. Black's rook.
Oh my gosh, it's winning.
Yeah, like Black's rook is also kind of badly placed because what you're supposed to now you're supposed to go for this so-called frontal attack, right? So you're supposed to play the rook to the c file so that the c pawn is not moving. He also lost on time. He also lost on time, but this position is winning. This position is winning. Impressive.
Flagged.
Impressive.
Wow. I think just a few moves ago, though. A few moves ago.
It was a
It was
draw, you
completely
mean?
fine. I think so. Rook a3 instead of pushing the pawn apparently is much better. So saving the rook.
After king
rook
c2.
a3. After king c2.
Just go rook a3, right? Just go rook a3 here. Yeah? And then, yeah, the rook will be distracted to stop the f-pawn anyways. Yeah, I mean, it was very strange. Okay, and it ended up being that. And then Aronian played rook c5, lost on time, but he would still lose, I believe, because of king b3. I want to play c4, right? And then after this check, I go to a4, rook c5, I go to b4, and I go c4, right? And this is it.
Right.
This is it. When the pawn gets to c5, it's completely winning. And this so-called frontal attack doesn't really work here. I'm getting my king to a6. So now this check is answered with king b7. And after rook c8, I think this should be just winning. King is too far. King f5, you go king b7, rook leaves. Because rook c5, king b6 is kind of the same. Rook leaves, whatever it goes. c5, white's winning. Okay.
Wow, that was intense.
That's a big statement, of course. Winning first game with white. Hikaru positions himself. To win, to win the tiebreak, to win the entire event. And what a comeback to classical format it would be. That's
amazing.
That's impressive.
So those hours on Twitch definitely paid off, and when it came down to the time scramble.
Yeah.
So I have to commend him.
Okay, well done, Hikaru. I believe we will have a short break before they return to the playing hall with game 2.
Right.
So one more time, yeah, let me remind you that this tournament, and I'm reluctant to say, but it was organized already. That kind of not is organized, but was organized. Like it's a maximum of 3-4 quick games left. So this tournament organized with the help of Kaspersky, Algorand, and FIDE Online Arena. Kaspersky as the cybersecurity partner of World Chess and FIDE, Algorand as the blockchain partner, and FIDE Online Arena as the official gaming zone of FIDE and World Chess. Right, so we are off for a very brief break. We'll be back for the second rapid game of the tiebreak. as you could see, players took their seats for game 2 of the tiebreak, final of Berlin Grand Prix. That is, Levon Aronian, after losing game 1, is in a must-win situation with white now in order to tie the match and extend the tiebreak to the 3+2 blitz time control. All right, we are back. Jesse, one more time.
Yeah.
Have to say, yeah, this how it's called. The live board is not live one more time, but what they have is actually something that we've seen. I believe something very similar to game 2.
Right.
Okay.
This is my favorite.
So,
right? This is my favorite thing to see.
This time he avoided d3 though. Aronian somehow has avoided d3. Bishop c4, bishop c5, castles, and then knight f6, rook e1. So one could argue that white plays this position being a full tempo up. Because usually you play d3 and then you are looking to play d4. This time white managed to get this position, kind of to play d2, d4 in one go, sort of. Does it make a difference? Yes. Does it promise white any sort of advantage? I don't know. Honestly, I mean, one would think, yeah, okay, they play this position, they try to get an advantage, and all of a sudden one guy gets it with full tempo up. Yes, it should be like clearly better for white, but who knows? It is confusing.
No. I like white's position. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is what I play. Sorry.
I tend to agree with it, but at the same time, like maybe you've given black kind of too much information by going early d4. He can react accordingly and still be sort of okay. I mean, it would not be...
This is very sneaky move.
It would not be a shock. Yeah, bishop e3, sneaky move. White sneaky. If knight takes e4, then white goes d5, right? And apparently wins material this way. Bishop e3, kind of quote-unquote blundering on e4, but knight e4, d5, yeah. Oops. Now, black plays h7, h6. Wait a second. Isn't white just kind of comfortably better, I would think?
What would the ideas here be? Probably trying to get the bishop to c2? I'm not too sure. Maybe with
knight to d2, knight d2. Yeah, well, you have to be ready for some sort of
probably,
e takes, c takes, and d5. I mean, this is certainly something to watch out for.
Okay.
Then you might be going with bishop d3, interestingly, so that you move away from d5. Yeah, but then black might
if d5
consider...
does happen, you have that open diagonal, which is quite nice.
Yeah, but still, like here, d5 is sort of an issue, right? It's tricky, really. And one of the things to do, you might say, okay, bishop b3. He plays bishop b3. So same, knight e4 is not possible yet because of d5. Right, and e takes, c takes, d5. Now white just replies with e5 and he's much better. Yeah, so bishop b3 is a good move.
To b3.
Yeah, bishop b3 is the good move. So now Hikaru needs to come up with something. Interestingly, he keeps getting kind of suspicious positions in this Italian. He was struggling against Yesipenko. He clearly struggled against Aronian in game 1. I mean, it wasn't much, but it's not what you would exactly call kind of equal position. And now, once again, he has some problems to solve. Rook to e8. So playing in a similar vein as the previous game, rook to e8, and well, you can't really play bishop e6 though. So rook to e8, it's more of a pressure on the e-pawn. If I don't pay attention at all, if I kind of go a4, for instance, then you already attack it twice, and you can take on you can take on e4. Therefore, white goes knight d2. So now.
So do you think, considering what Hikaru sort of mentioned about his stance on professional chess and all of that, what happens if he qualifies for the candidates? Do you think he'll play?
Of course he will, yeah. I mean, how...
He will change his title from semi-retired to active once again?
Well, I mean, it's hard to say, because, I mean, I don't think he will decline kind of participation in the candidates, right? I mean, he obviously will play. It's a cool tournament to play, and so on and so on. The other question is, how serious will he take his chances of winning the candidates? And then will he kind of quit streaming for half a year, spend this half a year preparing for the candidates, or he will do kind of a necessary amount of prep and would, you know, just show up, see how it goes, but if it doesn't go well, it doesn't go well. I'm still retired, right. I'm still a streamer, you know. Maybe he will play with this approach. We don't know.
Probably. Maybe getting some on-stream coaching, you know. Miro coaches Hikaru online.
Nah, I don't think it will be. It will be of any use to Hikaru. I'm trying to understand this knight d2. Can't black take now? So c takes, c takes knight e4 once again, because now this d5 trick might not work. That's what I thought. But never mind, black just played bishop d7. So apparently it was not working. Interesting. Because here, that's one of those positions when, if you can't do anything about the center, like you cannot really take on d4 or you can't play d5, then you're worse. Then you're worse, and worse for long, right? It's a long-lasting advantage for white. Once again, it's not easy to convert it into something real, but it's a long-lasting advantage. The knight is kind of getting stuck on d2 though, because, you know, very often it would be, once again, if it's a kind of normal Italian we are talking about, the knight would be on f1, g3, and only then white would go d4. And then with knight on g3, white has this plan of putting the queen on c1 and sacrificing on h6 very often. And then you look at it, and white has all the pieces kind of there, the knight on g3, knight on f3, right? Bishop on b3 looks at f7, and black doesn't have, or rather misses a lot, the dark square bishop, which is on a7, seemingly on a right diagonal, up to the point when you need to care about your king, and then you would prefer the bishop on f8. Right, so that would be the plan. Here, it's really hard.
Queen b1?
Yeah, queen b1, simply protecting e4, no mystery. No mystery. Protecting e4, perhaps it was already kind of hanging. And in some lines, I can imagine white going a4 and possibly queen a2. You know, doubling on the diagonal. Sometimes it works, but yeah, it's more of a defensive move for now. Queen b1, protect e4, see what black does, because for black, like last move, bishop d7, it's also kind of, you play semi-useful move because you don't have a straight up plan of clarifying the situation in the center. So they're kind of exercising who can play more useful moves before this tension, the d4 pawn, the e5 pawn is getting released this way or another. Queen e7, yeah.
So queen b1, I've never seen in this line. Is it normal?
I don't know normal, but I mean, but we haven't seen this line, right? I mean, or rather, we've seen this line. We haven't seen this specific position. It's one of the possible ideas. Right. A3, not a4. Okay, fine. And I'm not how serious am I about this queen a2. Might be, in fact, that the bishop will go to a2 and then b2, b4. I'm trying to justify.
b4. That's exactly what I'm thinking, but I wasn't sure if it was good because there's no way the knight can be involved as well, coming closer to the king and so on. So perhaps focusing on the diagonal b1, h7 will be more promising, but it's amazing. I wanted to say it, but I didn't know how silly it sounded. When you said it, I was like, okay, cool. It was all right.
Queen f8. Okay.
Yes.
Now we could consider going knight h4 with a little idea of knight g6 trapping the queen. I don't think black will blunder this. But,
oh wow!
But yeah, but the f7 pawn is pinned, right? So knight g6 actually does blunder, does trap the queen.
So
Levon
maybe
does
knight
something
h4,
else.
g5. How would black stop this? Probably just king h8.
King h8 or king h7, yeah. White plays queen d3, so that's Levon's idea. He just wants the queen on d3, so it guards e4, it guards d4, and that was one of the routes the queen could get there. That's why he went queen b1, queen d3. More or less similar to queen c2, queen d3, right? But queen c2, yeah, maybe there was a certain logic to it, because queen c2 would allow knight a5, and then you have to trade the b3 bishop. And after queen b1, knight a5, you can hide it on c2. All right, so the game goes on, the tension is still there. In fact, all the pieces are on the board. This is what I like about this Gioco Piano Italian, because some people it seems boring and, you know, everything is known. White gets the knight to g3, black gets the knight to g6. But yeah, but pieces remain on the board. And even if, let's say, both sides do everything correctly, you rarely end up in a completely symmetrical position. So there is always a bit of a fight.
Okay. Do you think maybe knight h4 with the idea of f4 could be good?
Yeah, at some point. Yeah, well, it's just knight h4 isn't a bad move, all in all. Right? Like you go knight h4, king h8, and you might just keep it for some time and then go to f5. b5 played by Hikaru, which makes it look even more Ruy Lopez-y, right? The pawn on b5. I don't know if it does any good, to be honest. I'm not sure why he went b5. I mean, one has to do something, one has to play moves, but it's, you know, it's very often that this pawn on b5 is source of black problems in the Ruy Lopez, right? I mean, especially positions with the blocked center where white starts a4 and ab5 opens the file for his rook. So it's not that I'm criticizing the move, but I can't really confirm on this being good, right? So it might be a little bit problematic. Rook to c1. So Aronian intends to play. I mean, first of all, he's getting ready for ed4, cd4. Yeah, and then all of a sudden the rook is on a very good square. But also he might.
You think he would do that? Do you think he will take on d4?
No,
Doesn't that possibly open up the diagonal?
I don't think black will take. No, it's just that. Yeah, I mean, if this ever happens, if this ever happens, the rook is good on c1. Yeah, and the other thing that he might be considering c4 one day. I don't know where, I don't know when, but c4 might be an idea. This allows white to take on e5. Now actually position gets very, very tactical, because white, for instance, can take on e5, and you would say, okay, but that's kind of a bishop for black, right? Knight b3, now I take. And it is indeed a bishop versus knight, but yeah, the white gets the square on c5 or a5, depending on his preferences. And does seem to be, this position does seem to be better for white.
But I mean, it looks beautiful, knight c5, b4 even.
Yeah, I'm just looking if I have to rush with it, because knight a5 in that position would also be interesting. So ideally I want one knight on c5, the other one on a5. All right, but Aronian just went bishop a2, c5 was played by Hikaru.
Immediately.
Quite logically seizing this space and connecting this these pawns.
What would you suggest here with white pieces?
Really having hard times. Not because I don't know what move to play, but there are too many interesting options. Like even like d5, keeping it in spirit of Chigorin variations of Ruy Lopez. So right where white blocks everything, and then the knight on a5 is misplaced. Whenever you go knight b7, white goes b4, so the knight is like terribly bad. And for this, by the way, I mean, have to mention Cup of Unzeke is one of the kind of the model games for this system. You can always try to take c5 or e5. I don't know if it makes any difference. Kind of take and go c4, or take and go b4. You can go b4 immediately, maybe. Like b4, this is what I keep thinking, like b4, black will probably end up playing c4, blocking the files. You go somewhere to like c2, e2 one more time, not sure how relevant is that. Knight c6, the bishop is terribly bad on a2, of course. But I might be getting a lot of space like this, like go here, go a4. The bishop on a2 is still kind of getting stuck. No. Look what Aronian has done, b3. b3, so the bishop remains on a2. Stops c4 at the very least.
And white can play c4 maybe.
Very original, yeah. So maybe white later on kind of moves the pawn, the d pawn, or exchanges the d pawn, and then goes c4. Yeah, but the bishop on a2 is still kind of not very active. The good news for Aronian is that at least black cannot sterilize the position with some exchanges or breakthroughs, right? So it's a lot of pieces on the board, and they're supposed to stay with a lot of pieces on the board for quite some time. Yeah, so you.
I don't know if you would decide to break the tension right now, because I mean, the square I'm looking at is d4. Everyone's like, well, when is he gonna take? Who's gonna take? What's gonna happen?
Yeah. And those are like really tough positions to play, right? Because one has to be very patient, like waiting for the chance, so that say white's capture on e5 or black's capture on d4 will actually be good, and not just exchange.
I was already looking at c takes d4, c takes d4, and I mean white at any point will have rook c7, so probably black will try to stop this. You
probably don't want to exchange. Yeah, I mean, if anything, there is such motif. Yeah, you can take with e pawn and try to apply enough pressure on e4. I don't think it works. I mean, first of all, I don't think it works. But just to mention that, if you can get this bishop c6, let's say, force white to play d5 and just go back, this might be an interesting position. The knight on a5 is misplaced, though. Yeah, the knight on f5 is, it's probably not good. It's probably not good, because bishop b1 and this battery is threatening oftentimes, yeah. So, you know, always want to say player X is in trouble when he's to move. that kind of shows how complex the position is. I mean, I'm looking at Aronian's position, and with many options, nothing is clear. And okay, Aronian has an important choice to make. He's in trouble right now. He found this b3. Now Hikaru has to decide on something. He's in trouble. I mean, all right. You were absolutely right. So black went knight c6, d5 followed, knight e7, and then c4. And okay, black has to act quickly, because b4. White has an idea of playing b3, b4, kind of blasting the queen side open. Knight to g6, okay. Still b4 seems to be like a possible move.
So bishop a2 is just a pawn at this point?
Not really. I mean, I go b4, and it's not given that black will be able to hold the c5 square. If you have to start trading, right, then I take back. Right. And then c5 will be an issue sooner or later, so black will have to take on c4, and then bishop takes c4. And the bishop all of a sudden is playing, a6 is weak. And sometimes, even if A pawn is exchanged for the B pawn, so kind of the entirety of queenside is liquidated. But white has more space. White has potentially an outpost on c6 if everything is kind of getting open. And
yeah, just as you mentioned, we have b4 on the board, and he's captured immediately. And
yeah,
we'll see
so
Levon probably capture.
Okay, he captured on b4. All right. I mean, the alternative is to take on a7 intermediate, and maybe this is what you do. Maybe to take on a7 first and then recapture the b4 pawn. I honestly think white's much better here. Okay,
Yeah.
simply captures back. bc4, yeah, bishop takes c4. So one more time, managed to guess a couple of moves correctly.
Nice.
And then, yeah, and then
Now bishop takes e3 probably.
yeah, well, perhaps we'll have to. I mean, he might go a5. That's another option. One more time to try to get rid of those pawns. But a5, b5 is pretty scary. Okay, bishop takes e3 now. Yeah, maybe bishop e3 now is actually a very good moment to take on e3 because on one hand, white wants to keep the battery, a queen behind the bishop on the diagonal, so that a6 is hanging, right? On the other hand, kind of capturing rook e3 is awkward, and also black will have knight f4 attacking the queen. So rook e3, knight f4, queen f1 maybe. Maybe this is what the white's supposed to do. So a trade happens, rook takes e3, and rook f to b8 is played by Hikaru Nakamura, attacking the a3 pawn. Sorry, why a3 pawn? b4 pawn. a3 popped up because of queen a3, the move that he has just played.
Yeah, queen a3 to defend. And also probably just putting some extra pressure on e6 as well.
Yeah, so, well, I wonder if he can take on a6, apparently not, right? I mean, if white's to move bishop a6, there is bishop b5. But with queen on a3 guarding the b4 pawn, he's free to move this knight to b3, a5, and potentially c6. So that's one of the possible routes for this d2 knight.
Right.
Queen b8.
I was actually looking at ways to defend b4. Do you think defending with the queen was possibly the best?
Well, apparently, I mean, the moment he played queen a3, the alternative would be rook b1, and this is not very pleasant because you're kind of pinned, right? b1 would be protected for now, but still, I would not be completely calm about this setup. Okay, bishop goes to c4. Bishop goes to b5. So now knight c4.
I can imagine how annoying this e4 pawn will be as well for white to defend, because now it's a question of, do you move the rook to the c file from e3, and what happens to the e4 pawn if you want to move the knight?
Well, I think you actually do move the knight. The question is if knight c4 or knight b3, because what black threatens is a6, a5 to exchange the last queenside pawn, and that would make black's defense much easier. There might be a question of capturing on b5 as well. It kind of takes on b5. If rook takes, well, perhaps I say knight c4, stopping a5, and then knight a5, knight c6 potentially. Looks interesting. I mean, I don't know if it kind of works till sort of full extent, but at least looks interesting. And if a takes b5, knight c4 is stopped, but c6 is still kind of a nice outpost for white, so white can play queen b2. Planning for rook c6 sometimes, planning once again for knight b3, knight a5. We'll see. We'll see. After bishop b5, Aronian is thinking. A little bit more comfortable on the clock, Levon Aronian. Also, I suspect his position is objectively better. But Naka is not without a chance.
Yeah, I remember in the first game as well, he was up on time. And in those final moments, he actually ended up dipping down below Hikaru before they started scrambling, both playing on the seconds that they had, and then he flagged. So maybe even if it's just 1 minute, Hikaru has proven to play a lot faster, coming to the time where he has to. So,
yeah. Look, so Queen A5, Hikaru captured on F1. That's an interesting turn of events. Yeah, Queen D8 check with the tempo, Rook takes, and King takes F1. So one more time, it's all about White protecting, not losing the B pawn and applying enough pressure on the A pawn. In this case, White, of course, is superior. But yeah, but how do you do it now? Rook C4 runs into A5, yeah? And then at least Black is getting rid of the weak pawn. Knight C4. We're thinking Knight C4.
To target D6 maybe?
Yeah, you want to attack D6.
And then, yeah, I'm not sure if E5 drops 2, but not on G6.
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky. Rook B4, Knight D6, I would believe White's better. But maybe you can play a passive move like Knight E8. And then it's still sort of problematic for White to guard B4. Like Rook B3, Rook B5, for instance, intending to double. Might be good enough. Might be good enough.
Maybe even A5 can be pretty annoying there.
Look what he's done. Rook B3.
Rook B3.
I was thinking A5 then, but maybe A5 B5, yeah? A5 B5, and he still kind of keeps the B pawn. Does Hikaru look surprised with Rook B3? Not clear. Because sometimes his facial expression suggests that he's generally surprised with his opponent's move. Okay. Rook to B5 maybe, to first block the pawn. And then we would more or less transpose to the variation I was talking about, like Rook to B5, Knight C4, Knight E8, and then the other Rook to B8. Rook B5 played, okay.
Rook B5, as you mentioned.
Yeah. So now A5 is a threat. Well, actually, after Knight C4, there is other thing he can potentially consider, is going A5. And then Knight D6, yeah, White gets kind of protected passed pawn and stuff. Ah, well, Levon didn't do this. He went Knight E1. Yeah, so Knight... Wait a second, Knight C4, there would also be Knight E4, sorry. No, Knight C4 doesn't make any sense. Well, what am I talking about? Knight E1 to D3, and to protect the E4 pawn with F2, F3. Okay, that makes sense. That certainly makes sense. But then Black can play A5, get rid of the last remaining pawn, and hopefully survive like that.
So A5 now, do you think is possible? Because I was looking at A5,
B
B takes A5, and if the rook were to take, I mean, the knight is defending.
Maybe
A5.
this rook takes. Maybe this rook takes, and then once again you swap the rooks at some point. Go check C8, go Rook D8, attack D6. Black starts counter-attacking E4. So it's still very sharp, in fact. Still very sharp. Hikaru decides not to go after A5, but goes Knight E8 simply, kind of preventively protecting D6. Maybe going
it's
Knight
like Knight
E7.
E1 was so strong that I need to also bring my knight back.
Yeah, but look what he's doing after Knight D3. He goes F5. So now if you play F3, Black can trade, and E4 is kind of weak till the end of the game.
F5.
Yeah, and
So
capturing F5, yeah. Capturing F5, Black probably goes Knight E7, and yeah, at least
probably
make
defending it with F3.
Yeah,
It's not so bad.
F3 is probably what you do, yeah. F3 f3 is probably what you do, but then, as I said, black might be just capturing there, going knight f6. And
Knight f6.
yeah, the e4 pawn will
What's it
always be weak. Yeah. So f3 played, fe4, fe4. Still not in rush to play knight f6. Might consider something else. Knight f4 is the move.
Ooh.
Okay, knight f4 is what he ends up playing.
All right. So now Aronian has 6.5 minutes. Hikaru on 4.5 minutes.
And once again, the more pieces you exchange, the easier for black it becomes. The easier for black it becomes.
Especially given the first game.
Yeah. Okay, Aronian captures.
Under a lot of pressure. So this is basically the Armageddon of all games, because white has to win in order to stay in.
And he even has more time on the clock, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So this is like an Armageddon situation after move 60, but with 10-second increment.
Yeah, so rook b8. Now it's clear the b pawn will be exchanged for the a pawn or just sacrificed. The question is if black equalizes after capturing the b4 pawn, because one of the things to do for white is to go, say, king f3, and then if you trade b4, I'm capturing the f4 pawn. If you go g5, king might go in, like king g4, we trade, king f5, and who knows? I mean, white's pawn down, but he can't, he couldn't care less by that point, I believe, right? Because, pawn down, whatever, as long as I have winning chances, I'm fine. By the way, rook c to b1, I've completely ignored the fact that the b3 rook is protected. I said, a pawn is getting swapped for the b pawn, but that's not necessarily what's on the board, because a5 now, white just captures. You have to trade on b3, you cannot take a5. So a5 is not possible. 5 is not possible. Did Hikaru play something? Not yet.
Not yet, I don't think.
Perhaps knight has to be moved. Like the knight on e8, maybe it was needed. It was needed to push the f pawn. Okay, but now the knight on e8 is not doing an awful lot. Well, the structure kind of suggests that you want the knight on e5. That's a very nice outpost, right? So maybe knight f6, and knight f6 it is. King f3.
Three maybe.
I would expect.
Then g5.
King f3, g5, and then would look for a good move for white, like knight c4 could be the move. Yeah, king f3.
Nice.
King f3 happening. Not that black has all that many choices. I think you can't afford losing the f4 pawn.
Yeah, chat is like, I'm closing my eyes now. Wake me up when it's over. I can't handle the pressure.
Yeah, imagine you're watching the game and the tension is that high. But what about the players? Let's not forget, they're competing for the win in the first Grand Prix leg. They're competing for a substantial amount of money, among other things, right? And
yes, indeed.
And especially when it breaks down to like one rapid game or sometimes like one blitz game, that of course is very, very tense. So he went to g5, and after knight c4 he went back to e8 once again. So now what? Knight to a5, knight to c6.
With every minute Aronian loses on the clock, he does more stretches. First the neck, then the shoulders. So knight e8. And I know you suggested this move, knight e8, to defend the d6 pawn in case of knight c4. But now my question is, does white go king g4, king h5?
King g4, king f5, I thought. King g4, king f5, king e6, that's one thing. The other could be just go knight a5, try to land the knight on c6. So this way you protect the b4 pawn, right, from c6, and then you more or less free the rooks, and then you go to the a file with both rooks. And he chose this third option, which is to go h4 to undermine the g5 pawn. Was it right? That's the question. Because Hikaru pretty quickly plays rook c8, plays rook c8.
I was expecting king g7 and the likes, because king g7 and then after taking you have king g6 defending the pawn in case of king g4. But also this just attacks the knight directly, so it makes sense. So knight d2 maybe.
I really want to play knight a5, knight c6, but maybe knight d2. Knight d2, rook c2 though. So, and it's kind of 2 consecutive active moves for black in a row. And it's a little bit too many, right? Knight a5. Now if you don't play rook c2, your rook will be stuck on the 8th rank, right? After white's knight c6. Like for instance, if black's back to your idea of playing king g7, then after knight c6, look what happens, right? So the rook is locked. Knight a7 is sort of a threat, but primarily I just want to put the knight on c6 and then play rook a3, play other rook to a1 and win the e6 pawn. Okay, after knight a5, black goes knight f6, hg happen.
Probably knight c6 now.
Yeah, knight c6,
okay, knight c6
sounds good, but then rook e8, knight d4, so they keep blitzing, and maybe that's the point where, yeah,
oh wow,
I leave behind my analysis board and just watch what's going on here.
That's a nice tactic. That's a really
yeah,
nice
Aronian
tactic.
completely blundered this one, I believe, because he was hopeful of going knight d4, attacking the b5 rook, and whenever the rook would leave, he'd put the knight on e6, blocking the e-file. Now after g4, I'm not sure if he can do anything, because doesn't matter where the king goes, any legal move with the king, black captures on e4 with a check. This is how I would describe, yeah. King takes, check on e4, check on e4, king f5 you have to go, yeah, and then if...
Taking on d5?
I mean, remembering the fact that draw is enough. You take on d5 with the rook, right? King f6. You take on d4, and you're a pawn up.
True.
You're a pawn up in the rook endgame, and you only need a draw, right? So I think,
True.
yeah, I think that's about time we can start congratulating Hikaru on winning the entire thing. Which was
bouncing on chickens before they hatch.
Honestly, very, very surprising. Not because of the way kind of it looked. I mean, he was very convincing in the group stage, apart from this last round game against Yesipenko. In his semi-final against Richie Rapport, in his final against Levon, yeah, he deserves it. But right before the start...
Please excuse the puppy noises in the background. I promise he's not contained in any way. He's just really excited about this final game.
Yeah. Okay. Is there a way? Is there even a way for Aronian to continue? I'm not sure. I mean, pawn down. Yeah. Pawn down needs to win. It's like
there's probably a chance now for Hikaru to just go for perpetual check if he really wants to. I'm not sure where a rook could go to stop the perpetual, because in the case of rook e3 or rook e1, there's always the check on e5 as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's gone.
Oof.
It's gone. Of course, yeah, Levon still has the time, so he'll spend some of it. He'll try to find at least some idea. Like rook c3 maybe. Rook c3, so that I have a threat of rook c8 and rook h1. Or maybe even this is not a threat, but still kind of imitating a threat. And also if you give me checks, I'll go to e6, d6 and so on. Rook f1, okay, rook f1 guarding f5. Then rook h5 makes a lot of sense. Threatening rook h6. Rook h5, yeah, threatening rook h6.
Sorry, chat is mentioning that when I mentioned my puppy, you were busy finishing a thought. your words were before the tournament.
Yeah, before the tournament, I have no
dot.
idea if there was anyone to pick Hikaru apart from for the winner. Apart, of course, from like billion people who are subscribed to him on Twitch. But like from quote-unquote chess experts, he didn't look like one of the favorites. I mean, it's understandable he was supposed to do well in this format, you know, but like to name him as the favorite, not clear. And yet he is, I believe, winning the first leg of FIDE Grand Prix. So it'd be... For him, if I remember the interview correctly, I think for him it will be Berlin once again in like 5 weeks.
Okay. So are any of these players, Solovan or Hikaru, playing in Belgrade?
No, Hikaru, as I said, I mean, it will be once again Berlin for him. Levon, okay. I'm not sure. I mean, I didn't check yet. Okay, rook f4
Is this
attacking. Winning for black,
check.
maybe?
King e7, check.
Rook check.
And just...
And rook h...
right, king
and
g7.
what? King e8, right? King e8.
Oh.
I mean, he has to go king e8.
Rook
right?
h7.
And rook h7, and after a check, king h8. Okay, so black is even winning. Black's even winning. Okay, king d8. King d8.
Oofy. Oh.
Rook h8 is a funny move. I mean, you're threatening a checkmate with the king move.
Yeah.
Like rook takes g4.
And king c8 maybe.
Yeah, he'll probably do it. Yeah, rook h8.
Yeah.
Rook h8, and then yeah, king c8 you run to e7. King d8 you go to a7, and now the rook is without the reach of the king. I guess he's just winning. Wait a sec. Rook e3 loses, right? King g7, rook e8, and then check with the other rook. No, it's game. Yeah, it's game. Hikaru wins. I don't know about the game. I mean, he's still free to just make a draw instead of winning this one, but he surely wins the match. Surely wins the match.
He wants to push, and it makes sense. There we go. Resignation.
Yeah, so last move was rook h8, and with 2-0 perfect score on the tiebreak, Hikaru beats Levon Aronian to become the winner of Berlin Grand Prix, the first leg of FIDE World Chess Grand Prix Series. Impressive performance.
Congratulations to Hikaru. Yeah?
Yeah, impressive performance, not losing a single game. Well, was close to lose to Yesipenko one more time. Then flawless, I want to say, flawless play against Richard Draport. With Aronian, was a bit of a struggle, those classical games, but then absolutely convincing performance in the rapid tiebreak. So Hikaru's the winner. Both Hikaru and Aronian keep very good chances of qualifying after becoming finalists, right? So that means
it does sort of strike the question, like, how do you qualify for the candidates to, obviously if you win 2 of the Grand Prix, it's guaranteed that you make it, but then how do you decide it? It's just the number of points that you get for the placement?
Yeah,
like
points for the placement, and my guess would be that kind of making it 2 times to the final is probably enough.
Okay.
So Aronian should not be kind of discouraged, right? Yeah, obviously it's not that pleasant to lose the final, but still he's done a lot, right? Because most of his colleagues didn't make it out of the group. Let's not forget those who are competing to qualify, right? I mean, some people just didn't make it out of the group.
You can see them packing up the board. They're not wasting any time.
Yeah, the tournament's over, ladies and gentlemen. The tournament's over. We are waiting for an interview with the happy winner, and hopefully with both finalists. We will not get any more live moves, as you can see, because the cord is getting removed from the DGP board.
Yeah, and I have to say before the interview, Miro, it's been such a privilege working with you. I think this is the first time we're working together, and honestly, I couldn't be more grateful to have a co-host like you.
Thank you very much, Jesse. Yeah, it was a pleasant experience, and I just hope one day that we can make it like being physically in the same studio, you know, because sometimes that's, yeah, like, you know, in this case, I would promise not to talk over you, because even though with modern technology, it's almost flawless, but still, I mean, some lag sometimes, and so on and so on. Yeah,
of course, I can just nudge you in reality, you know. I mean, just to remind everyone, I'm in South Africa and Miro is in Russia, so it has been obviously awesome working together, but there is that lag, but I haven't lost the spirit of the tournament. I feel like I'm there. I feel like, you know, we're watching the players and watching them play. The atmosphere is still there for me.
Yeah, and you seem to have the same, you know, the same thingy, this one. Well, for those who
Yes,
are wondering, yeah.
No, those of you wondering, of course, it's just a backdrop. I
It's
have
a
a green
backdrop.
screen behind me.
You can't
Yes,
touch it, yeah? You see? You can't touch it.
Yeah.
I can.
So I can become the background. I'm becoming one with the plant.
Yeah, and I can kind of touch the plant, proving that it's real. Yeah. Anyway, it was a very nice tournament. It was really nice working with Jesse for you guys, and well, we're waiting for a final interview, right? They are getting ready, so one more time let me read it out loud. Sponsors of the event: Kaspersky, Algorand, FIDE Online Arena. Kaspersky is as the cybersecurity partner, Algorand as the blockchain partner, and then FIDE Online Arena as the official gaming zone of World Chess and FIDE.
I am thanking everyone in chat as well. You guys are awesome sports. Thank you so much for the questions and the comments. Honestly, you kept me smiling and laughing.
Hikaru Nakamura. Hikaru, congratulations for the win, a really dramatic and exciting tiebreak. Could you take us through the first game, please? This endgame where you were better, then it was a draw, and you're better again. What happened there?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I got this great position where I was up a pawn. I mean, for whatever reason, I played g4, h4, and basically I just forgot that Levon could take h4, and then after rook b5, there's this rook c4, rook c5 just is a draw. I basically forgot about this completely. Yeah, I mean, this game obviously set the tone for the second game, certainly. I think, I mean, just tricky endgame, I mean, when all is said and done, but, you know, I found a way to win it, and obviously that was very important, because the second game would have been completely different otherwise.
Of course. Levon, after losing such a dramatic game, you had 15 minutes to recover your focus, your willpower. How were you able to do that? Could you explain to us, to the fans? At least it seemed that you were doing quite well in the second game for a lot of time.
Yeah, I was doing well, but then yeah, I think at some point I should have just played some bishop a2, and then black doesn't have any play. And then I had a slightly better position throughout the game, but it's difficult to convert because there's always this activity. And yeah, somehow it slowly evaporated into a drawn position. Yeah.
Yes.
So I think my opening in the second game was pretty good, but then I took some inaccurate decisions.
Hikaru, you're streaming every day, playing 20, 30, 40 games sometimes. Do you think playing so many blitz and rapid games online every day sharpens your skills for this type of tiebreak?
Yeah, I mean, I think all these events, I mean, the ones that I played in Magnus, Levon, and so forth, I mean, they're all good. But obviously, playing every day, I think, keeps you sharper. I mean, the question is whether you can still play the openings reasonably well or not. I mean, that's sort of the sacrifice you make when you play. But I think in terms of just practically speaking, I mean, I've played more than anybody over the last couple of years, and and I think it definitely helped for sure.
Levon, yesterday in the stream, Danil Dubov, an excellent Russian player, mentioned that he considered that one of Hikaru's main skills was his defensive capacities. He's really tough to beat, especially in this format. Do you agree with that assessment by Danil after playing with him today, these two games?
Yeah, of course. I think Hikaru is kind of, because, well, his openings were never his strong point. He got himself in bad positions quite often, but he always fights, so I admire that. And he's defending pretty well, as the first game showed. He defended a difficult position, even got a reasonable counterplay. So I think I need to work on my technique of playing better in better positions. So that's my conclusion out of this.
That was actually one of my questions for the third leg. You're coming back to play. Finalists here, you still have excellent chances to grab one of the two spots. So that's going to be your main focus during the next 3 weeks, to try and improve even more your converting skills?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. This has been a problem, and the day before yesterday, also yesterday, I think my positions were pretty good, and I just let the advantage disappear. So this, I need to cherish the advantage more.
So my final question for Hikaru: what does this mean for you, this victory in such an important tournament and after such a dramatic tiebreak?
Well, I mean, I think it's nice to win, obviously. I mean, I think I had a little bit of luck. I think I got probably the best possible group that I could have asked for at the start, which definitely helped. But I mean, I thought I played well, and I mean, not to jinx myself, but it seems like I haven't lost a game in forever. So I'm pretty happy. But I mean, it's just one tournament, and we'll see how the second and third legs go, and what the situation is. Okay. As it's the last final press conference, we're going to offer the floor to any journalists if they want to field a question for one of the top players. Does anyone want to field a question for Hikaru or for Levon?
I would like to. Yeah.
Yep. So we have a question. Probably better if you come towards here, say your name and your media outlet, and so we can capture your voice on the microphone.
Hikaru, Oliver Kern from Neues Deutschland. Congratulations. Your last over-the-board classical tournament win was a couple of years ago, and it was a very different time for you then. Does that feel different now, winning this tournament, comparing to the others?
Well, I mean, the first thing is that this final Grand Prix, I think, was in Hamburg, if I remember correctly, and I had nothing to play for. So, I mean, I lost this match to Veselin. I think that's the last classical tournament I played, and I mean, there was just nothing on the line. So, I mean, I just played, and it didn't go well, obviously. But yeah, I think in general, the main difference is I just don't panic anymore. I mean, I get a bad position, and I just try to find good moves. I mean, I think that's the biggest difference, is the mindset versus a couple of years ago. For me, and I mean, just in general, I'm a lot happier now than I was.
And now that you know that you can win on this stage again, is it still 50-50, that the question about going to the candidates or giving a place to another one?
I mean, right now, I mean, none of that's on my mind. I think down the road I'll think about it, but still, it's only one tournament, and even though I won this event, I mean, I think if I finish last in my group or something, I won't qualify. So I think it's way too early to even think about such things.
All right, thank you very much, and congratulations.
Do we have any other questions from journalists here? Okay, so thanks both of you for a really exciting tiebreak, and good luck in your future endeavors. Okay.
You're okay?
You can ask questions now.
That's gonna be short.
No, it's fine. It doesn't matter.
We're streaming live, right? Yes? No? We're streaming live.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Hikaru, congratulations. So how does invincibility feel like?
That's an interesting way of putting it. I mean, I think I survived some bad positions in this event. But again, I mean, when I think about it, I played, what did I play? For the World Rapid and Blitz, I didn't lose a game. I played the St. Louis event, I didn't lose a game. So I'm actually very proud of the fact that I haven't lost a Rapid or Blitz game in a very, very long time. I think the last one I lost was probably to Ali Reza in 2019. Like I said before, I think mainly you try to find good moves. And I mean, I think the main difference is that I didn't really feel any pressure. I mean, even today, I was just just playing. And I could definitely tell that for Levon, he was quite a bit more nervous than I was. So yeah, I think nerves play a role, but just in general, I mean, I just played well, and I think it showed.
You have already mentioned many times that one of the major differences for you here was that since let's say the past 2 years, you do not put so many importance to this game, so you play better, easier. Do you think there has been also this factor of you having a special hunger for games, since you had still quite a big break of classical?
I mean, I guess if there's one thing that's maybe different is having not played classical, when I'm playing the game, it feels fresh. I mean, if I think back to maybe 2019 or even 2018, you know, I play some game, let's just say it's against Shaka or Levon or someone like that. You reach the middle game and it's pretty boring, and I mean, already in my mind it's like, okay, this is boring, not very exciting, we're going to draw, and that's life. But now, I mean, having not played, I don't really have any of those thoughts. It's more like I just try to play and find good moves. So perhaps, I mean, having that long break helped in terms of just like not being so negative towards the game of chess.
What would you name as the best game throughout all this event?
I mean, it's tough. On the one hand, I want to say the game against Grishuk, but that was also mostly preparation. So I mean, I just got a good position and won that game. But I think if I have to pick a game, I mean, I honestly felt that the second rapid game sort of epitomized, I mean, the difference between now and before, and that, I mean, I got this position that wasn't great, but I still just kept making moves. And I think in the past, if I had this position against Levon, you go back to 2019, I think there's probably at least a 50% chance, if not more, that I lose that second game, even after winning the first one.
What would be to you the most interesting opening idea throughout this first stage of Grand Prix?
I think what I did against Sasha probably was what I did against Sasha is one, and then there's also this idea that Levon played against Lenier. Those are probably the two games that are most critical for opening theory.
Right. Perhaps my final question so far. We also have the closing ceremony later on. Would you have to say a couple of words about the organization of the tournament in total? Also, now that the times are not easy and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of organization, it was very well done. They had testing every day. I mean, sure, it was kind of annoying to deal with, but I mean, I think that was good. I think the general, I mean, unfortunately, separation from like the crowds, I mean, also in a way was a good thing. But overall, yeah, I thought it was a lot of fun. There were a lot of people here every day, a lot of people watching online, and I mean, I can't really be critical of it, unlike perhaps some other tournaments.
All right, well, now you have such a good month towards some good rest and also preparation for the next stage. Good luck with that, and hope you will enjoy it.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think we are done with all the interviews, and it's no longer time to say Berlin, but time to say goodbye. First leg of Grand Prix Series 2022 is in the books. The winner is Hikaru Nakamura, and Grand Prix will be back, if I'm not mistaken. Next stage starts on 28th February. It will be in Belgrade, Serbia, and I believe we'll be covering it live if nothing changes. So till then, folks, and yeah, hope you enjoy the tournament.
Yeah, sounds good. And yeah, hopefully see you soon, Miro. And it was really nice working with you once again. And thanks so much, chat.
Yeah.
Great sportsman.
My pleasure, Jesse. And yeah, thanks everyone who was watching. Thanks, chat, for asking us questions, sometimes supporting when we were struggling to find, you know, subject to discuss. Okay, it was great fun overall. Thanks very much.
Yeah.